The StoneZONE with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone. Thank God it's Friday. And yes, you are back in the Stone Zone. President Donald Trump and his allies won an important legal victory yesterday. It is a welcome respite from the setbacks at the hands of a politicized judiciary system in the states and at the federal level. Here to help me break it down is my co-host from slingshot.news, Troy Smith. Troy, welcome back into the Stone Zone.
Roger, as always, it's an honor to be here, and especially after such a big day yesterday where we had President Trump and President Biden both at the southern border, eager to get into that right away here. But as you said, a major legal victory for President Trump that we're going to talk about later in the show. But I want to start things off, Roger, by talking about the border, because we saw President Trump visit Eagle Pass yesterday and meet with Texas Governor Abbott, who he actually said, and we saw reports this morning that Trump said absolutely he's considering Abbott for his vice president. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that right off the bat, on how you feel about Governor Greg Abbott possibly becoming Trump's vice president.
It's an interesting notion. For those who've just tuning in, joining us very shortly is a patriot for whom I have enormous respect. Greg Stenstrom is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. He has served his country with distinction. He is one of the foremost leaders in the country on the question of computer sciences, social media, extensive experience in security, fraud investigations, problem solving, and he represented himself in a vital legal battle in Pennsylvania. We're going to get to that a little later in the show, but you don't want to go anywhere because Greg Stenstrom deserves to take a victory lap today, and he's going to do so right here on the Stone Zone. That's an interesting question you raised, Troy, because, well, among other things, Texas is not a reliably red state. It may have that reputation. A poll that I saw yesterday in the U.S. Senate race showed that Ted Cruz was literally in a 41-41 dead heat with his Democratic opponent for the U.S. Senate. So there is probably no candidate in the country who better symbolizes the need to seal our border than Governor Greg Abbott. So, look, I don't know what the president will ultimately decide. I made it very clear from the beginning that I've talked about a number of candidates I find interesting or intriguing, but I'm endorsing no one. I'm waiting until the president makes his decision. Then and only then will I support a candidate. That will be the candidate he chooses. But yesterday's juxtaposition at the border could not have been more stark. Trump looked terrific. Joe Biden looked like, well, he wasn't sure where he was, really.
Well, that's exactly right, Roger. And we're going to run a clip real quickly. I just want to break this down real quickly so everybody understands. The media is trying to make this a situation, and I know this because I work with the flow of information. I work with news aggregates and people and syndicators and things like that. They're setting it up so that in order to talk about Biden's cognitive decline, you have to talk about Trump's cognitive decline. And they are and we're going to get into that in a second. I want to talk about that with you, Roger, because I think your voice is very important on this issue. But first, I want to show a clip we have of Joe Biden kind of stumbling around yesterday at the border. And I want you guys to take a look at this guy walking around the border, President Biden, and just ask yourself, does this look like somebody who's in charge? Does this look like somebody who's capable of leading our country in this very difficult time? Let's go ahead and run that clip.
That speaks volumes. I mean, the fact that Joe Biden is frail, the fact that he's in decline. This was noted by his own former speechwriter, John Favreau, in a podcast just the other day. So we're getting to the point where even Democrats are saying it. I'm not even sure why he went to the border. First of all, I really don't understand why he went to East Palestine, Ohio. All that did was underline the fact that when he should have gone, back when the crisis took place, he didn't go. And by the time he did go, it was very clear that the people there were very angry. It's like, where have you been? Too little, too late. It is pretty clear to me that Joe Biden didn't decide to go to the border until he heard that President Trump was going to the border.
Well, Roger, and that's a very important point that you just made, because as people know, President Trump announced his visit to the border before Joe Biden's. Biden only came in afterwards and said he was going to visit the border. And again, so we're going to play a clip here from MSNBC and Lawrence O'Donnell, who we played the clip of just a few days ago, losing his mind, which is a classic. Lawrence O'Donnell went on TV last night attempting to claim that Trump was stuttering and having trouble speaking during his event and his speech at the border, which was just completely false. He plays a clip in which nothing happens, and he sits there and smirks at the clip as if he's showing something that's going to change the minds of the American people. So they're framing this as Trump's mental decline coupled with Biden's mental decline, because they're finally starting to recognize Biden's decline. And they can't do that without also giving a dig to Trump, because it indicts their entire narrative. So let's roll the clip of Lawrence O'Donnell flat out lying last night about Trump's visit to the border.
Donald Trump desperately tried to compete with President Biden's visit to the southern border today by going to another spot on the border 350 miles away from the president, where once again, Donald Trump spoke gibberish about the border.
Millions of people from places unknown, from countries unknown, who don't speak languages. We have languages coming into our country. We have nobody that even speaks those languages.
No, we have people in this country who speak every language. And then Donald Trump added this lie about the people who are crossing the southern border.
These are the people that are coming into our country, and they're coming from jails, and they're coming from prisons, and they're coming from mental institutions, and they're coming from insane asylums, and they're terrorists. They're being led into our country, and it's horrible. It's horrible.
Needless to say, that is not an accurate description of the people crossing the border. He's lying about the people who cross the border and who they are. But at the same time, Donald Trump is doing everything he can to help everyone who is illegally crossing the border now to continue illegally crossing.
Now, Roger, I want to get your reaction, but let's point out real quickly that the bill that they're talking about would have allowed millions of illegal immigrants into this country every year. So the idea that Trump tanked the bill in the first place is ridiculous. But on top of it, the idea that this bill would have prevented illegal immigration. I mean, Roger, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, the idea that the people crossing into the country are model citizens is just not so. It's important to understand literally nothing that Lawrence O'Donnell says is accurate or true or can be believed. I'm surprised that he can sit up, frankly. But it is, once again, Alinsky's rules. Anything they themselves are doing, they immediately blame on Donald Trump. I think people understand who caused the problem at the border. It was not Donald Trump and the Republicans. In fact, border crossings during the time, particularly in the final year of Trump's presidency, had trickled off to almost nothing, illegal border crossings. Those who say, well, we may have had as many as 10 million people enter the country, I think that number's woefully low based on experts that I speak to. I mean, it's almost laughable, but then MSNBC is laughable. This isn't a news outlet. This is a propaganda front.
Well, Roger, and I think that's important to highlight, and especially the turnover of Biden administration officials going to MSNBC. It's almost like a revolving door. And we had there's a lot to get to today, and we obviously have a great guest coming on in the second half of the show. You're not going to want to miss that. But this morning, Roger, I saw a video that I wanted to bring up and get your opinion on that we can play here. Nikki Haley made a statement where she's kind of urging judges to hurry up and to move Trump's legal cases ahead very quickly. And I think it's important to highlight for those who didn't see it, you need to go watch Roger and I's show yesterday with lawyer David Schoen, who's just an absolute genius when it comes to this stuff. He was highlighting the fact that there's a real thing happening here where a lot of these cases are falling apart, whether it be Georgia, in New York. He talked about that case in depth, and he talked about Florida in depth, which we're also going to get to today. But I think it's important to highlight that there's a real movement here where Trump is getting a benefit, and at the same time, now they're saying, oh, Nikki Haley's saying, we got to rush, we got to get judgments, we got to get them right now. Let's see that video.
But I think it's important that all of that come out now so that we're not dealing with it later. I think he's hoping it comes out later so that he can make it all go away. Yeah. But either way, we've got a problem on our hands. I mean, chaos follows Donald Trump wherever he goes. We continue to see this play out, and we can't be a country in disarray and a world on fire and go through 4 more years of chaos. We won't survive it.
How much of a priority do you think it should be for these cases to get resolved before November, regardless or not?
I just think they need to do things quickly. Yeah. If it's hearing a case, do it quickly. If it's an appeal, do it quickly.
All right, Roger, your thoughts on that?
Troy, this is very clearly election interference. Nikki Haley, much like Governor Ron DeSantis, perhaps even Joe Biden himself, well, they're hoping that President Trump gets hit by a bus, or that he has some legal reason that would somehow prevent him from returning to the White House. That really isn't going to happen, and it's a heck of a thin reed for you to base a presidential campaign on. After Super Tuesday, which is just a few days from now, it's going to become virtually mathematically impossible for Nikki Haley to emerge as the Republican nominee for president. So, look, I'm not really sure why she's staying in this race. Is it to provide maximum damage to Donald Trump so that they reward her with a bunch of other defense contractor corporate boards? Or has she been promised a cabinet job in some future Democratic administration, should there be one? It's really not apparent to me, but she's moving backwards in the polls. She has no prospect of being nominated, and what she's calling for is election interference. The public interest in a quick election is not higher than the public interest in getting some of these important constitutional issues correct. So the only reason they want to rush is to impact the Trump freight train that is hurtling towards the White House.
Well, that's a very good point, Roger, and I think it highlights the difference between some of these cases. You know, DeSantis claimed the whole time that he was on the front lines of the culture war, and yet he wasn't being attacked legally the way that Trump has been. Yesterday or earlier this week, Roger, we aired a clip of Mark Cuban talking about possibly running for president. And we talk. I made the prediction here that Mark Cuban will actually be the top of the no labels ticket heading into 2024. And we haven't had time the last couple of days. I wanted to ask you, do you think it's possible that Mark Cuban runs for president? And if he did, do you think it would be under a no labels ticket?
You know, it's interesting. We know from history there was a time in the past when Steve Bannon from the War Room approached Mark Cuban and urged him to run for president. And at that time, Cuban and I don't think there's any evidence that he is a conservative, certainly not an America First person, had any interest. Now, would it be beneficial to them to have a billionaire? Yes, I think it probably would. On the other hand, I don't see any appetite. So I think that is largely, Troy, a pipe dream. Troy, I've just read this amazing piece in the Gateway Pundit about this legal case in Pennsylvania, and I'd like to go to it, and we can come back and finish politics at the end of the show. But I don't want to leave Greg Stenstrom waiting in the wings here any longer. I'm very excited to have him. I'm very excited about his victory. Let's bring him on and open this up, because it hasn't gotten the kind of media coverage it really deserves. A great piece now. I just saw it in the Gateway Pundit, which kind of sums up an extraordinary victory. You and I have kept in touch these many months. You and Leah Hoops, who was a great woman, great patriot. You were involved in this long-running litigation where ultimately you represented yourselves pro se, while you are undoubtedly a brilliant guy, Naval Academy graduate, one of the smartest patriots I know. You're not an attorney, but you put these attorneys to shame. So tell us what this case was about, and tell us what transpired.
Well, this was a defamation case against President Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Phil Klein, the former Kansas Attorney General, the Thomas More Society, and myself, Leah Hoops, and Jenna Ellis. And the crux of the case was it was a defamation suit brought forward by the voting machine custodian. Now, that may seem like a low-level job, but the man who filled this job, his name was James Savage. He was the former president of the Philadelphia U.S. Steelworkers, and he's he's worked with President Obama, the head of the AFL-CIO. He's a pretty big deal, and he filed a defamation suit against all of us for bringing him up as participating in the stolen election of November 2020. So, in a nutshell, Leah and myself were the only ones that we know of in the country that used a truth as a complete defense strategy and an affirmative defense, they call that. And we said everything we said was the truth. He absolutely did everything we said he did. They're all guilty as hell. They did, in fact, steal the election, and they perverted 327,000 votes, and they stole a couple of 100,000 votes that not only turned the tide in Pennsylvania, but had a significant impact in the national election. Well, they objected to that, and they used James Savage as a proxy and attacked all of us. President Trump, Mike Medeo, who's partners with Alina Habba, he was representing Trump in the hearings up in Philadelphia. He was able to get one of the cases dismissed for legislative immunity, which is a technical thing. And then he got a stay until President Trump is clear of his all the criminal allegations against him around the country. So it was left to Leah and myself to, continue the case. So in a nutshell, we won on the truth as a complete defense, and they were unable to refute or dispute a single fact. And that is that the elections in Delaware County, and we believe in Pennsylvania and around the country, were stolen. We wrote a book about it called The Parallel Election, a Blueprint for Deception. And we were the first ones to talk about the V drives, which I think people understand what V drives are now that follow your show at least. And also the mail-in ballots and how they faked mail-in ballots and how they perverted the elections. So I think it was a big win. My understanding is that there were 68 cases with President Trump that he's been sued in various capacities around the country. And to my understanding, this was the first case that actually got to a significant level of discovery where the judge actually let the discovery in. And it's the first one that was done by pro se defendants. So what we've been saying now is President Trump, is now 1 in 68. So I think that's a pretty big deal. We were excited, and I think President Trump can take a victory lap himself, and I hope it will continue on in Pennsylvania, and he can win the state of Pennsylvania as a result.
So does the lawsuit remain alive as far as the president is concerned, since he got a stay? Or does
No,
the suit...
what happened was on January 10th, we were offered a settlement. Leah and myself were offered a settlement to to depart the case. They said they would let Leah and myself depart the case on January 10th. We've been beating the heck out of them in all the hearings, and we said no. One goes, we all go, and we'll be happy to keep beating your ass in court at the trial. So your decision. You let us all go, and then we'll have a discussion, and we'll go for monetary damages against you later. But right now, you have to let President Trump and Rudy Giuliani out. They already had a judgment against Mayor Giuliani they were suing him for $1 million, and they had a default judgment against him. So he was on the line to have to pay quite a bit of money, and President Trump would have had to come back with Alina and Mike Medeo to defend himself, to continue to defend himself, through the end of the year and during the campaign, which was, I think, the intent of the lawsuit. But that's it. It's all done. It was just discontinued with prejudice. The judge cited sanctions and cited misconduct by the attorney, and we will be coming back at them now that we've proven that the truth is a complete defense, and the election of 2020 was stolen, at least here in Delaware County.
This is an extraordinary victory. It demonstrates the power of prayer and hard work and persistence. Greg, you've been telling me for many months you were going to win this, and I've watched it. I read every one of your pro se filings. They were brilliant. What are the implications for this going forward, both in Pennsylvania and nationally, hopefully?
Well, I think most of the people in the country, the majority of the people in this country now believe and know that they believed that the election was stolen, but now they know. And I think the big thing here is that no one can, they can't use the pundits, bad actors, Democrats, whoever. They can't say that, well, there's no evidence of election fraud and the elections were the safest and most secure ever. We now have hard physical evidence that's been entered. 276 gigabytes of documents, emails, videos, audios that plainly showed election officials, senior election officials, stealing the election. They clearly show collusion with people in the Department of Justice, including Attorney General Barr, Governor Shapiro. It shows collusion up and down the chain that could be used in his other cases. Anyone who comes back at President Trump or Mayor Giuliani or anybody who says that there's election fraud, we now have a body of evidence they can go back to. And I think most importantly is it gives veracity to the other cases that we have. We didn't just stop in 2020. We knew the elections were stolen. Now people know they were stolen. But we also moved forward over the last 4 years, and we filed recount cases, multiple election fraud cases in the state of Pennsylvania. And we currently have recount cases in Fayette County, Chester County, Delaware County, and these are big counties. And I think that the judges are more inclined to look at this and go, well, there really was fraud, and I better get behind these things and do the recounts. And that's a big win because people want to know for sure. I think everybody believes there was fraud, but now we know it for a fact. And President Trump can say as much as he wants because the case was dismissed with prejudice, which means President Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Roger, any of the news media can definitively state there was a massive election fraud in the state of Pennsylvania, and we're going to redress it. And we're going to hopefully fix this before the November election when President Trump will be running in the general election.
This is very, very truly a landmark case. Troy, do you have a question for Greg Stenstrom?
Absolutely, Greg. We talked a little bit about FactCheckorg, and I'd like you to go into that a little bit because it's very important information and how this is being rigged kind of against the truth.
Sure. one of the tactics that they've used, and they used it against Roger, Mike Flynn, Paul Manafort, President Trump, is that they place an article or they place some news story and they say, oh, you've been debunked. So shortly after the election and after our legislative appearances at the Pennsylvania Senate in Gettysburg, and after appearances in Arlington, Virginia, where we reiterated the fraud, what they did is they placed an article with FactCheckorg. And a lot of people think the fact checkers are some sort of news organization. Well, FactCheck.org is actually the Annenberg Public Policy Center in the University of Pennsylvania. They're one and the same. It's a non-governmental organization that is a partisan organization, and the chairman of that organization is Joe Biden. And the Chinese donated $55 million to the Annenberg Public Policy Foundation, and Joe Biden gets $1 million a year from the Annenberg Public Policy Center in the Biden chair. So basically what they did is they placed an article and they said all election fraud claims have been debunked. And then because of the name FactCheck.org, we got the knucklehead that earlier from MSNBC you had on, they go out and they say, look, FactCheck.org says that it's all been debunked. Well, what we found through our investigation was right in their billing records of the lawyers. The billing records say that they coordinated with FactCheck.org to place these false stories and to mitigate and put pressure, just to say, hey, just to deny things in the press. Just like the person you had on there, I don't even know the guy that from the MSNBC talking about the border earlier. The guy just spouts off a bunch of crap, and then people are supposed to accept that as truth. But from a legal perspective, it's been a tactic that's been accepted by the courts now, and including the U.S. Supreme Court, the Commonwealth Court, the state courts, the federal courts, where opposing attorneys will place an article and they'll say, hey, look, this is our reference. FactCheck.org said it was fake. Okay. And then the courts say, oh, well, it was fake. That's if all you had to do when you were guilty was to place an article in some periodical that says, look, I'm innocent, then it wouldn't go very well. We wouldn't need any courts. So I think it was very significant that people need to understand that a lot of these FactCheck.org, they're a fraud. They are not a fact-checking organization. They're a political organization run by, at the head of the heap, well, not run by Joe Biden, they pay Biden, but it's run by very, very bad actors and partisan characters.
You're absolutely right. I had my own experience with FactCheck.org. At one point, they actually, to my surprise, they actually published a story which correctly said that despite the ravings of Adam Schiff, there was really no evidence that I had collaborated in any way with WikiLeaks or received anything from them, never mind disseminating it to any third person. Then, as soon as I heralded that in public, they immediately wrote a second story saying, well, we can't reach that conclusion because there's not enough information to conclude that, which of course there was. These fact-check organizations are just another part of the jackals in the fake news media spinning false narratives so that they can go back and point to them. People may not remember this, but essentially the FBI gave a copy of the phony Steele dossier to a reporter at yahoo.com who then reported that so that the FBI could then point back at the story they had planted. It was a story by Mike Isikoff and say, oh, you see, Isikoff wrote it, therefore it must be a fact. Isikoff's newest book is lauding the greatness of Fani Willis, that courageous woman prosecutor, in which he basically says in the promos for his book that he had access to highly confidential grand jury information. If that's true, well then, Mr. Isikoff has broken the law. We're working on that story. This is an extraordinary victory. I cannot tell you how happy I am for you and for Leah. This has been a long, lonely fight. I know, Greg, that you made it without help from anybody. but that you never threw in the towel. You never gave up. This is living proof not only that Jesus Christ can do anything, but when you're right and you stick to the facts and you refuse to quit fighting, victory can be won. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Roger, and put on the full armor of God like you do every day, and President Trump does, and Mike Lindell and Troy, you put on the full armor of God and press forward, and we do what we can. Thank you very much, Roger. It's always a pleasure.
Greg, it's a great honor to see you. And again, if there's anybody who deserves to celebrate tonight, well, that would be you. Give my very best to Leah Hoop. She's a great woman, a great patriot in her own right. And thank you so much for joining us on the Stone Zone.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Troy.
All right, Troy, I'm going to go to a shameless commercial break to keep the lights on, and then we'll go back to your political news agenda. Folks, I'm very, very particular about the products that I promote here at the Stone Zone, but I have found one all-natural supplement that I myself use. Now, I'm a longtime aficionado and a believer in alternative medicine. I'm not saying that all Western medicine is bad, but I do take a substantial number of all-natural supplements, Chinese herbs, go to acupuncture for prophylactic reasons. But there is one product that has made a huge difference in my life, and it is called Cardio Miracle. Cardio Miracle. Now, Cardio Miracle is nitric oxide. It's a proprietary blend of oxic nitrate with nitric oxide with a number of other key antioxidant ingredients. Nitric oxide exists as one of the body's most potent natural antioxidants. Normally, it is a short-lived gas produced in the walls of the arteries and veins, but as you age and get older, your natural production diminishes. Nitric oxide is essential for life and is involved in many critical body functions, especially keeping arteries, veins, and your heart young, healthy, and flexible. It also contributes to keeping blood pressure and cholesterol at healthy levels. It supports the anti-inflammatory response. It promotes good general health as well as good sexual health. And this is most important for me, it supports natural energy and faster recovery. Cardio Miracle features a nitric oxide blend, a proprietary blend, and also a blend of other key antioxidants. It is easy to take. You mix a capful of it, essentially twice a day, mixing it with juice or with water. Has a pleasant taste, tastes kind of like raspberry, and it has made a very, very real difference in my life. So I recommend it to you. You can go to cardiomiracle.com, and when you do, use promo code STONE. That's cardiomiracle.com and use promo code STONE. If you're one of those people who doesn't like to put your credit card information on the internet, you can dial 1-800-663-0158. When they answer, well, tell them once again that you are using promo code STONE. It is, I think, relatively inexpensive. I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be one. If you have a heart problem, go see a cardiologist. But for general health, this is an all natural supplement that I think you'll be very pleased with. Thank you. All right, let's return to my colleague Troy Smith from slingshot.news and get back into the politics of today. Troy, take it away.
Roger, always an honor, and I feel like we're talking first class here, because if there's anybody that understands the political goings on and has seen it a few times, it's you. So I'm very interested to get your thoughts on this piece of news that we ran on slingshot.news just a few days ago, breaking news worldwide. that Mitch McConnell is stepping down. He's announced that he's going to step down as the Senate Republican leader in November of this year. And this has kind of been a long thing coming, Roger, because McConnell has been showing signs that he's been slowing down and even having some meltdowns in public. And just, forewarning, we're going to show you the video here for anybody that's dealt with this kind of thing with their relatives or whatever. It's obviously, it's tough to watch. And it's scary to look at it from a political perspective, because this is a guy with a tremendous amount of power. It's a guy that is supposed to be leading the Republican caucus in the Senate, and he doesn't appear well. Let's run a clip of McConnell having one of his freeze moments just a few months ago before this announcement right now.
Path to finishing the NDAA this week has been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of
Okay, Mitch? Anything else you want to say, or should I just go back to your office? Do you want to say anything else to the press?
Go ahead, John.
I'll take it back. Let's go back to you.
Go ahead, John.
So this is we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the IRA, and of course.
Well, Troy, first of all, we take no delight or comfort or pleasure in that. I don't wish Mitch McConnell, who I've known since his days as a county judge in Kentucky. It's kind of like a county executive. It's really an executive position rather than a judicial position. We don't wish him any ill will. On the other hand, there is this great tendency in Washington when people amass that kind of power and in turn amass that kind of wealth, they never leave. They never go back to Pocatello, as they say. Mitch McConnell came to Washington dirt poor. He leaves a multi-millionaire, according to his own filings, as required by law. And yes, I give him credit for the confirmation of multiple Republican Supreme Court nominees. In some cases were made, those are not the individuals that I would have appointed, but I also am not second guessing President Trump. He also beat back impeachment, not once, but twice. He should never be underestimated as a legislative strategist and operative. But I also agree with you. It's time for new blood. And he's already announced that he won't endorse President Trump. Not that I think it matters one way or another. So I'm glad that Kevin McCarthy is no longer the speaker. I'd like to see the new speaker do some things he hasn't done yet, but he's done some things that I like. But yes, I think it's time for new leadership. Now, the obvious question is who should replace him? Well, you do need someone who is capable of working with all factions and elements within the Republican caucus. Unfortunately, that is reality. So I can't wave a wand and have the senator who I like the most in terms of policy. That would be Senator Rand Paul. If I could make anyone the Senate Majority Leader, that's who I would choose. Rand Paul finds himself, even within his own caucus, when it comes to war and peace issues, when it comes to distrust of our intelligence agencies, when it comes to his distrust of the deep state, when it comes to his deep commitment to civil libertarianism, he finds himself often in a minority. He's also been completely fearless about questioning the COVID-19 pandemic narrative put forward by the government. and has paid a price for that. Some may also remember he was actually viciously attacked in his own front yard by some lunatic. So Rand Paul, like his father, is a very good man. His father's actually a very great man. It was my great privilege, actually, in 1977, to work on Congressman Ron Paul's first special election to the U.S. Congress in the Houston suburbs. So in a perfect world, I guess that's who I would like. I haven't counted votes within the Republican caucus, so I'm uncertain what the prospects would be. But I would think that he is probably too independent for the caucus. I'm also not sure he'd be interested, frankly. It'd be very hard to maintain his outspoken independence, which I think is vitally important, at the same time to be the Republican leader. Josh Hawley comes to mind as someone else who I would have a great confidence in. I've heard some reference to J.D. Vance. I like J.D. Vance, but he's been a senator for less than 2 years. I think that is unlikely. John Cornyn of Texas would not be my choice. Not be my choice. My guess, just a guess, but my guess is you're probably going to find someone who is more, in the center of the party, but someone who can work effectively with all factions. John Thune comes to mind as a potential. You could see in that clip that John Thune, he's right out of central casting in terms of the television image of the party. And my guess is that he probably has a leg up. But again, I'm not handicapping the Republican Senate conference. Troy, who do you like?
I think that Tim Scott is an interesting choice. He would be an interesting person to serve in that role, and he also has, my question to you on that matter would be is how do you look at Tim Scott? Is he really somebody who gets along with just about everybody, or does he? To me, that's what it appears like. But is that your feel in the situation?
Well, look, I like Tim Scott, but I do think that he tends to be more of a neocon Republican. Some have put him forward as a potential candidate for vice president. I'm not convinced that he yet has the experience and the depth, the temperament, or the judgment to be president. And frankly, his presidential campaign probably hurt his prospects to be vice president because he never got any traction. One senator I should mention, who I really kind of come around on, I would not be unhappy at all if the Senate caucus took Rick Scott, the senator from Florida. Rick Scott is very independent. He can't be bought. He's endorsed President Donald Trump. He's strongly for Trump. I have some disagreements with him, particularly on some Second Amendment issues. I'm not saying I agree with him on everything, but I frankly think that would be a good choice. And I'd also point out to you, Rick Scott had the courage to challenge Mitch McConnell when nobody else would. And that speaks to a level of independence and a level of courage that I think might commend him as a potential Senate Majority Leader.
Well, and it's difficult, Roger, because like you said, the Senate, I think, is a much different game than the House, and it's a much more refined political chessboard than the House. I think you can get away with certain things in the House that you can't get away with in the Senate, and like you said, it's gonna require them to choose somebody who's kind of more middle in the aisle. It's going to be tremendously interesting. I think you hit the nail on the head with the South Dakota Senator John Thune. He's going to be at the top of that list, I think, of people. And as of people, I pay attention to the campaign finance aspect of this, Roger, because I'm constantly looking into that aspect of it. And I've seen money that traditionally was coming from people like Paul Singer, into the coffers of Mitch McConnell. Over the last couple of years, that's been going into Thun's coffers a little bit more and more. There's more money heading into his campaign, as well as Tim Scott. That's why I mentioned him as well. And you don't really know whether, what the whole Tim Scott presidential thing was about, how that'll play on things. But it's going to be tremendously interesting to see who the Republicans select. And I think it's an overall good thing, despite, whatever had to happen for it to be there, that Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell are no longer going to be leading this party. My question would be for Mitch McConnell. We showed the health problems there. I don't think anybody would deny that there's some serious issues. And if you listen to his speech, he talked about some of the issues that he's been having and how it's a difficult time for his family. And you could see the sentiment around it was kind of like, okay, he's going away. Now, his Senate term doesn't expire until 2027, Roger. And he said that he will serve out that term. With the Senate as close as it is, and especially with Kentucky being, gaining traction and having more Democrat influence, I believe the governor of Kentucky is a Democrat, which would allow, if McConnell did step down, would allow them to kind of put in McConnell's place a Democrat, which would give the Democrats a boost in the Senate. So my interest is in, one, who they're going to select, and two, how long is McConnell going to be able to hang on, and how do they play that situation? Because it looks to me like I'm not so sure that he's going to be able to make it to 2027. And just as a human being, just as somebody looking at him on a human level, I say, I don't know how many years on earth he has left. I would hope that he doesn't spend his last days in Washington like Dianne Feinstein, clinging to that little bit of power, because that is so sad, Roger. We want, just as a human being, we want Mitch McConnell to enjoy the last few years he has. I hope that we can figure out something politically where it doesn't hurt the party, but at the same time, it's a difficult situation. I think it's something that the voters need to keep in mind as well. When you head to the ballot box in November, Joe Biden is having a lot of the same problems that Mitch McConnell's having. And we talk about it every day here, but if you look on the mainstream media, they don't want to mention it. And really, they don't mention McConnell either. I think because ultimately, Roger, that spotlight, if they start doing that, hey, mental decline, which you're starting to do with Trump, I think it ultimately comes back to Biden. Do you think, and this is just something for you've watched these elections a lot longer than I have, do you think if the media continues to hammer the false claim that Trump is having some kind of cognitive decline, that will stick? I mean, it doesn't seem to me that there's any evidence that would make people believe that, Roger. Do you?
No, this is a joke. I watched that video multiple times. There was never any juncture in which Donald Trump could not remember his own wife's name. Now, it's ironic that of all things, Joe Biden picks that, because there is, of course, a video where Joe Biden seemed to confuse who was his wife and who was his sister. And that was a couple years ago. I've spent time with the president. I talk to him occasionally. He's at the top of his game. I think he's as sharp as he has ever been. He's lost a little weight. He feels good. Just think about the pace that he's kept. I mean, he campaigned and did a rally in South Carolina. Then he flew to the Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville, gave another speech there. Then he flew back to South Carolina to give a victory speech there. He is leaving men a third of his age who work for him in the dust in terms of his energy level. There's no slippage that I have seen, none whatsoever, in his physical or mental state. I actually think he thrives on combat. He thrives on this fight. Is he angry? Yes. He has every right to be angry. No former president has been treated this way. The charges against him are, in many cases, ludicrous, in many cases, fabricated. Think how you would feel if you're charged with illegally retaining classified and top secret documents, only to learn, first of all, believing that as a president of the United States and as a former president of the United States, under the Presidential Records Act, that you have the authority to keep those documents, then learning that Joe Biden retained more documents than you did as a vice president and as a U.S. senator, which he had no authority under the law to hold on to, but then have the Justice Department conclude that even though, using their words, he had willfully retained documents in violation of the law and had also not kept them in a locked facility, but had them in multiple locations, but that Biden will not be prosecuted simply because, well, he's an elderly man and his memory is slipping. Here's what I think. I remember the epic legal fight in which President Richard Nixon sought to keep his White House tapes secret, that he did not want them turned over where they would be made public. The U.S. Supreme Court, I think wrongly, overturned 200 previous years of rulings regarding executive privilege, and because of the political atmosphere in the country, ordered that those tapes be turned over, and they were ultimately made public. What about the tape recording of the interrogation or just the questioning by Special Counsel Robert Hur of Joe Biden? We seem to have two versions of what was said. Biden has made a number of claims that don't seem to match the public record. But why would the Congress, for example, why would the House Oversight Committee or any House committee with subpoena authority seek those recordings? I mean, after all, the Washington Post says that democracy dies in darkness, right? So we should have full disclosure. We should be able to hear Biden's handling of that session with the special counsel. Believe me, if it were Donald Trump, they would most definitely be demanding that it all be released. So the people could make a judgment here. Let's hear those tapes and see what kind of condition Joe Biden was in. I think that is only fair.
Absolutely, Roger, and it's full transparency, and I think the same thing as far as the Biden White House is concerned. The communications, the backdoor communications between officials, you know that they got to be messaging each other, being like, "What the hell are we supposed to do here with this guy?" I mean, we can't even give him a speech to read. I saw footage yesterday of the teleprompter that they're using. It looks like a 70-inch flat screen TV with letters this big, and he still struggles to read the damn thing. So you know they're hiding, they're running around back and forth like, what the hell are we supposed to do? And I think it's important for the people to understand that, and it's important to know that, because where's the policy coming from? This guy can't read a speech. He can't walk down the border. We saw him in his Forrest Gump outfit yesterday with the suit and the hat on and everything, walking around and stumbling around. Where's the policy coming from? Where are the decisions coming from? If they're coming from Kamala Harris, then she should be president. And I know people say, oh, well, Kamala Harris can't ever be president. Well, if Joe Biden's not able to do the job, she is the vice president. That's how it works. And I'm sorry to, I'm sorry if that's not politically great or whatever, Roger, but at the same time, I think it's better to have somebody who is cognizant, even if they are terrible, like Kamala Harris. It's better to have somebody that can actually speak and walk and talk than to have Biden out there. I mean, it's just embarrassing for the country.
Well, Troy, I think you're absolutely right. Look, if I'm wrong, and I very well could be wrong, and Joe Biden hangs in there as the nominee of the Democratic Party, you can bet that Trump and the Republicans are going to be making the case that if you're voting for the Biden-Kamala Harris ticket, you are in fact voting for Kamala Harris for president. Just based on the actuarial tables, plus what we see with our own eyes, there's at least a high probability that Joe Biden does not survive another term. No, we don't wish that on him. That's not what we're saying. But I think it is a legitimate issue. By the way, Hillary Clinton said his physical condition was a legitimate issue. So if Joe suddenly gets Arkansided, you'll know how that happened. Troy, let me make one other key point to you for the weekend. On my WABC radio show, you can listen to that at WABCradio.com, WABCradio.com. This coming Sunday from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, I have Colonel John Mills, who analyzes that AT&T cell phone brownout, if you will, last week, and talks about the dangers to our power grid and the very real dangers posed not only to this country by communist China, but also the infiltration of the State Department by certain Iranian compromised actors. Also talks about the danger of the Cuban spy station that the Chinese have put 90 miles from our shore. I also have Pastor J.D. Shuttlesworth, who talks about not only his recent trip to the border in El Paso and what he saw there, but the importance of the role of faith in the public arena today. And then lastly, criminal defense attorney David Schoen joins me on WABCRadio.com. And so wherever you are in the country, you can go to WABCRadio.com. We'll be live streaming from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock Sunday afternoon Eastern Time. You're not going to want to miss any of that great programming. Until Monday, I'm Roger Stone. This is my colleague, Troy Smith. We thank you for joining us today on the Stone Zone. And in the meantime, God bless you and Godspeed.